everybody. Welcome to our live. I hope you had a great week. You can share the live with your friends. I would really appreciate that. If you have any questions, you can type in the comment section, or if you have any comments that are relevant to what we're discussing this afternoon, you can also type in the comment section. As I said earlier, we appreciate, thank you, Themba, for joining us and for your time. Today, we are talking about the tools of leverage in the creation of wealth. Have you ever heard of these abbreviations? OPM, other people's money, OPT, other people's time, OPI, other people's ideas, OPE, other people's experience, OPW, other people's work. All these abbreviations are related to the idea of employing tools of leverage in wealth acceleration. Let us be always be clear on one thing. Wealth creators are always on the lookout of ideas, and they're always on the lookout of tools of leverage to employ in their wealth creation journey. I'll be very disappointed today if you do not master the 6 tools of leverage, because that is the gist of today's presentation. I'll repeat again the abbreviations. We have OPM, other people's money, OPT, other people's time, OPI, other people's ideas, OPE, other people's experiences, OPW, other people's work. Themba, do you have any news for the week?
I do have news for the week. Not much though, Tafadzwa, but just to emphasize that the gist of today's presentation is the 6 tools of leverage. And I hope everyone who listens to us today will employ one of the 6 tools that we're going to talk about. But let's just talk about what's been happening in this past week, Tafadzwa. Let me start by wishing Warren Buffett a happy 94th birthday. Warren Buffett is my favorite character of all time, and I'm sure you know why, Tafadzwa. He is the greatest investor of all time, and he's somebody that I have followed from a distance for a number of years. But there is something that also happened in this week concerning Warren Buffett's company, Berkshire Hathaway. On Wednesday this week, the company just went over $1 trillion in valuation. So it's joined the elite clubs of companies such as Apple and Microsoft, Nvidia, Google, Amazon, and Meta that are valued at over $1 trillion. So what is the thing that I think we can learn from Warren Buffett? 3 things that I would want to highlight. You can actually make money by being a consistent investor. So if all else fails in your life, just be a consistent investor. Just be consistent at it. And that's the lesson that we learned from Warren Buffett. I think the second lesson that we can learn from Warren Buffett is it's possible to live a very long and fulfilling life doing what you enjoy the most. Warren Buffett enjoys investing. He enjoys reading about company performance, and he's at 94, he's still CEO of his company. I know of many, or I've heard of many people who will never reach the age of 94 because by then they are old, but he's still running $1 trillion company, even at that age, and taking significant decision for that matter. I think the third thing that we can learn is you need to constantly reinvent yourself. If I look at Warren Buffett, He is somebody who is constantly reinventing himself, looking at opportunities in the market. So if I look at some of the trades that he has done in recent months, he has cut his shareholdings in Apple, for example, but he has also made some acquisitions that he hopes he will yield positive results in the future. I was very interested in what he said in his birthday message. He's basically cautioning people that the superb performance of prior years may not be replicated in the future. So that's one of the things that he has said. So happy birthday, Warren Buffett. The second thing that I would want to say is that when I look at market indicators globally, when I look at the rand, there seems to be a positive sentiment in the markets. In America, share prices are in record territory. If I look at the rand, I think the rand yesterday closed at a 13-month high. It's 17 rands 60 to the dollar, and that's the strongest level since July 2023. And it's all been because of the positive economic sentiment in the market. The third thing that I would want to talk about, um, I always encourage everyone who follows us to be always be forward looking and looking at where is the money being made. Um, Let me ask you a question, Tafazo. I enjoy putting you on the spot. Where is the money being made at the moment? How are people making money? From what you're reading, where is the money being made at the moment?
Which people and from where?
I know it's a vague question. It's a vague question, but I just wanted to pick up your brains on what are the new ways that people are making money these days that you have heard of? So that's essentially the question. Where is the money being made these days? Is it from starting businesses? Is it from getting a job? Where are people making money these days?
I think from maybe I'll just quote my circle. I think some are making money because they're executives, and some are making money from property business, and I'm not thinking offhand someone is doing a small business who's really making money. But yeah, also some are making money from business, but most people I know who are in business are still small to medium enterprises, and I can't really say they're making that money
Yeah.
that we can talk about.
Very interesting. It was a vague question just to generate some discussion, Tafanzo. But one of the things that I picked up this week is that quite a lot of money is flowing into podcasting. These people that make podcasts, they're actually making quite a lot of money. So why don't we do this, Tafazo? Why don't we evolve this particular platform that we have into a podcast? Because that seems to be where the money is being made. So I was reading a recent report by, Magellan AI, and they were actually saying that advertising revenue is actually being spent on podcasts. So when they track how, where the advertising spent is going, it's going into podcasts. So that kind of revenue increased by 22% this year. And going forward, overall podcast ad revenue is expected to pass the 2 billion mark by the end of this year. In other words, advertisers are looking at various people who are doing their podcasts, and they are prepared to pour in money on podcasts. I'm sure you've heard about Trevor Noah. Trevor Noah, the comedian, he used to work elsewhere, but he has now started his own podcast. And I was wondering why it had gone that way. But now it all makes sense to me because research is actually showing that in America, at least 100 million Americans listen to at least one podcast per week. And that's the research that was done by Edson. So many people are listening to to podcasts. There is another research that was done by Nielsen and Edson jointly, and it's showing that Americans spend more than 4 hours a day listening to audio content, and consumers give 20% of their daily ad supported audio time to podcasts. So it looks like there is a trend. I don't know if that trend is observable in Africa, but there is definitely a trend in America of people spending quite a lot of time listening to podcasts, but also of advertisers spending quite a lot of ad revenue, ad money in these podcasts. So I was actually following these people. I've never heard of them, Tefazwa. Travis and Jason Kelsey, they are NFL brothers. They signed a deal of 100 million with Amazon for their podcast. So that seems to be the largest deal that has been done in 2024 on podcasts. So it looks like they've got their own podcast, but 100 million US dollars is a lot of money. Then there is also something called the Smartless Podcast, which is hosted by Will Arnett, Jason Bateman, and Sean Hayes. And that podcast show also signed 100 million deal as well. So that's where it seems the money is being made, at least in America. And I've seen also quite a number of individuals this side of the world going into podcasts as well. So just a few money making ideas to the people that are following us. I don't think people are watching TV anymore. It's now about podcasts. It's now about content that is on the internet, and ad revenue is also following that trend as well. So that's why I was asking you, that question. So the issue that we're dealing with is where is the money being made at the moment. Let's look at longer term trends in terms of where will the money be made in 10, 20 years to come. Because it's very, very important to watch trends. It's very, very important to look at the problems in society, and because that's what entrepreneurs do, they look at the problems in society and try to come up with solutions to solve those problems. So when we look into the long term, the issue of water, Tafadzwa, is where the money is going to be made. In this week, I went through quite a number of articles which were all talking about water. I'm sure you've heard the statement, Tafazo, that in future there is a possibility of world wars being fought over water because water is becoming a very scarce resource. So in this week, I went through a report, and the title of that report was South Africa's Scarce Water Needs Careful Management. So they were looking at um, the water resources in South Africa and how those water resources were being managed. And the report was actually, obviously coming up with solutions on how water governance should improve. But one of the things that I learned from that report is that South Africa is a water scarce country. It's the 30th driest country in the world. So using water wisely, especially as the population is growing, especially as droughts are occurring, and those droughts are related to climate change, obviously, in the future, there will be a lack of clean, fresh water, which will impact on people's health. So any entrepreneur who is thinking of coming up with ideas to solve these problems, I think a lot of billions are going to be generated there. One of the things that I also came across, Tafadzwa, still on the topic of water, in South Africa, we have had quite a lot of crime. In this week, people were talking about the construction mafias. These are the people that are demanding money on a number of construction projects. But it seems that crime has even moved on to what they're calling the water mafias. So I went through a number of reports talking about how the water mafias are taking over. These are people who are destroying municipal infrastructure so that the municipal infrastructure, the water infrastructure does not work, especially the water pumping infrastructure. And when it's not working, they then sell the water at exorbitant prices. So there's water being sold illegally in eThekwini by water thieves at 6 to 15 times the going municipal rates. And then I also came across a report. I think this one was talking about the Rhodes University, which suspended lectures because of the water crisis in Makanda there. So there's definitely water crisis in Makanda. So the university has been without municipal water since the 23rd of August, which is last Friday, and they have had to suspend, lectures. But obviously, I'm referring to these reports about water, but it's quite clear to me that in the future, a lot of wealth is going to be created by entrepreneurs trying to solve some of these water problems that we're talking about. Let's talk about, lastly, the economy in Zimbabwe, Tafadzwa. Um, I don't know what you think about the ZIG, Tafadzwa. I will not put you on the spot. Initially, when the ZIG was introduced, I was very, very skeptical. And then after some time, I bought what the central bank was saying, and there was a little bit of confidence. But I think in the past few weeks, we have seen the parallel market rate in Zimbabwe going up. It could be around 26, 25, 26, thereabout, where the official rate is around 13 to the US dollar. So there was a report in this week that the central bank is intervening strategically in the foreign exchange markets to meet demand for dollars because of the 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 ZIG, which seems to be showing some weakness. So let's continue watching that space. That report was also showing that the usage of the ZIG is increasing among the population. I think the ratio between the US dollar and the ZIG is around 61 to 61:39. In other words, 61% of all the transactions in Zimbabwe now are denominated in the ZIG and 39% denominated in US dollars, which is an improvement over the past months. But I'm just a little bit concerned about what's happening in the FX markets. I hope it's not an indication of the ZIG, finally collapsing as has happened to all the other currencies. I'm not going to talk about other disturbing reports that I have read about Zimbabwe because I would want to continue to be optimistic about that economy. But let's just continue watching how the new currency will continue to perform. Let me stop there, Tafadzwa, and hand over to you.
Thank you for not putting me on the spot about Zeke. I've just heard about Zeke on the radio, social media. So I have no idea what Zeke is about. Today we have got 2 books of the week. What are these books, Themba?
Right. These are books that talk about financial leverage. The discussion today is on financial leverage. I finished the one book. I couldn't finish the other book. I'm still reading it. The book that I was able to finish, it's titled "How to Grow Rich with the Power of Leverage." So you can see there is a man who is lifting a very heavy object using some kind of a lever, right? And what this book is all about, it was written by Praveen Kumar and Prashant Kumar. I found this book to be very, very, useful. The argument that they are making in this book is that if you study the lives of very successful people, these people always apply the principle of leverage and they use that principle to maximum effect. So without some kind of leverage, it's very difficult to accelerate your wealth. Um, there is an equation that they present in the book, which will form part of my thought for the day. So the equation goes something like this: compounding plus leveraging is equal to accelerated wealth, right? Compounding plus leveraging is equal to accelerated wealth. What it basically means is that if you want to grow your wealth at accelerated rates, you have to apply compounding and also to apply leveraging as well. So we've spoken about compounding and the power of compounding. I think it was one of the celebrated scientists who said compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. And we spoke about compounding also in recent presentations. And one of the points that we made around compounding is that when you start investing, don't withdraw your capital. Let that capital grow at compound rates, because that's very, very important. The mistake that many people make when they are investing is that they invest some money, and then when there is progress in terms of interest, in terms of dividends, they quickly use those dividends, and they don't allow the capital to compound over time. So that's the principle of compounding. But if you want to accelerate your wealth, in addition to employing compounding, you have to employ leveraging as well. And we'll explain what leveraging is all about. And that's how you accelerate your wealth. So that's the main equation that they deal with in this book. There was a statement in the book which I found also interesting. People who only work hard have got limited leverage. If you're working hard physically and are not getting ahead financially, then you are probably someone else's leverage. In other words, somebody is using you to generate their own wealth. And we'll explain that later on. But I think the main idea that I got was this leverage equation: compounding plus leveraging is equal to accelerated wealth. Why is that equation important? That equation is very important because last week we were talking about how we've got 3 enemies in the wealth creation journey. Now, for you to win the race against those 3 enemies, these are some of the tools that you need to employ to accelerate your wealth. For example, we've heard what Warren Buffett has said. Warren Buffett is the most successful investor of all time. But he's saying, when he looks into the future, he's saying that compound rates are going to decrease, right? which means we would need to apply leveraging, right? And we've already spoken about one example of leveraging, Tafazo, which is podcasting. That whole idea of podcasting, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, there wasn't anything called podcasting. So the whole concept of podcasting and having somebody sign 100 million deal, right? Podcasting. When I was growing up, we were watching TVs. There weren't any podcasts or all of these things that people are doing, these days. But nowadays, people are creating lots of wealth in podcasting. That's an example of leveraging of wealth. So beyond just compounding your wealth, you need to employ leveraging so that we come up with ideas such as a podcast, for example. That's how wealth is going to be, created. But it's also very important for us to understand this equation, because with most people, and we made this point very clear, we are trapped in a poverty trap. Now, how do you escape that poverty trap? It's either you compound your efforts or you employ some form of leverage, right? And we'll explain leverage so that you accelerate your wealth. Sometimes you'll hear financial planners saying, your wealth will grow at 5%, 10%. Whilst those percentages are attractive, you're not going to be fabulously wealthy with those percentages. For example, in the portfolio that I manage, sometimes people are surprised that I am able to achieve rates of 60% on my stock portfolio. It's because of employing tools of leverage, and we'll talk about that just now. Our second book of the week is a book by Todd Tresder. It's called The Leverage Equation: How to Work Less, Make More, and Cut 30 Years off Your Retirement Plan. This book is more than 200 pages. I haven't finished reading the book. The first book I finished reading it, it wasn't that long. The second book, I think it's 237 pages. I haven't gone through it. But I found this book to be very, very interesting. One of the things that I got about this book is some of the myths that is trying to dispel. This is common, wisdom that is being spread out there. For example, the whole idea of, retiring at the age of 65. The author says, look, you can become financially independent at any age, as long as you are able to apply leverage. So I think you're beginning to understand what leverage is all about. Leverage is all about doing more with less. So I know of people who make a lot of money, but they are working less. They are employing leverage. Leverage is about speed. So instead of retiring at the age of 65, you retire at the age of 30. That's speed. In church circles, you sometimes hear people talking about divine speed, divine accelerated. And some people even use expressions such as, give me the legs of a cheetah. Maybe you need legs of a cheetah in wealth accumulation, but the language that we are using today is leverage. Whether you use language such as, Lord, give me the legs of a cheetah in wealth accumulation, you are simply talking about leverage. And what we are talking about here is the tools to achieve that divine speed that you are talking about, so that you work less, you make more, and you don't retire at the age of 30. The second thing that this author does not subscribe to is the whole idea of asset allocation. I promote the idea of asset allocation, of diversification, but he actually prefers higher leverage asset classes so that you can accelerate your wealth creation. It's something that I speak about, but the only thing that I talk about in my financial education courses is that it's a journey. You need to start with the diversification and asset allocation. And then once you become an expert, you begin to employ certain tools of leverage, for example. So let me give you an example, Tafazo. When I started investing, I was investing in shares, in stocks. You are going to make some money, but then as you gather more financial education, you begin to invest in options and doing option trading. You make more money that way with very little capital. And that's part of employing leverage that we are talking about. Sometimes you begin to borrow money to buy shares, but obviously you need quite a lot of financial education there. Then he says making more money is not just about getting a promotion or a raise. Um, so the way I would want us to understand leverage is to use the term exponential growth as opposed to incremental growth. So when we are talking about tools of leverage, we are essentially talking about what are some of the tools that you can implement to grow your wealth exponentially. The Bible talks about a tenfold, 100, well, a thousandfold, and 10,000-fold. That's what we are talking about there. So these are concepts that are even supported by the Bible. The author also says it does not take money to make money, right? And I found that to be very, very interesting. So those are our books for the week, Tafadzwa, The Leverage Equation and How to Grow Rich with the Power of Leverage.
Thank you very much for those books. I've got 3 questions that I want to ask. I hope they make financial sense. The first one is when I see that the tools of leverage, other people's money, other people's time, other people's ideas, other people's experience, other people's work, isn't there a fine line like manipulation or exploitation? I'm not sure what the right words are there. Like those probably who don't mind exploiting people, they do well or they do more using these tools of leverage because you are using other people's money, time, ideas. How do we differentiate maximizing the tools of leverage without exploiting people? That's the first one. Then the second one about the podcasts, you give an example of Trevor Noah. Trevor Noah is already a brand and a name. If you are a no-name, I hope that's a kind word, or if you don't have a brand that is known and you start a podcast, what was the probability of making money out of it? Because the time you're going to take to build the following, Trevor Noah is already at an advantage over you. Yeah. Then Warren Buffett, which tool of leverage has he maximized? Because if you say at 93 or 94, he's still trading, he's still making decisions. Of course, maybe there's a percentage of God's grace, because you said he takes Coke, he takes McDonald's, all these fast foods. Well, most people by 90, whether by design or default, some can't even see, some can't even read, some have been will be victims of dementia and all the illnesses that come with old age. But from what you're saying, he seems to be still functional. Is it because he's doing something that he loves? Is it much about God's grace, about what's his secret, and which tool of leverage is he maximized for him to be where he is?
I love your question, Stefazo. Can I propose that we go to explain what leverage is, and then as I explain what leverage is, I can then start answering your question, because that's very, very important. So what I would want to do, Tafazo, is to first define what leverage is, right? Because that's very, very important. So what is leverage? Let me just start, with a quote from a famous scientist, physicist called Archimedes. I'm sure you've met the Archimedes principle, Tafazo, in science. Archimedes long ago said, give me a lever long enough and a place to stand on, and I will move the entire world. Right. Give me a lever long enough and a place to stand on, and I will move the entire world. This is a statement that was said by Archimedes a long time ago. And the lever that he was talking about is basically this instrument which will help you to lift heavy objects with very little effort. That's what the lever does. And that's where we're getting our term leverage. So leverage is basically the power to control a lot with just a little. It's the ability to have results with with very little efforts, right? That's what we're talking about. Because if you see somebody who is wealthy, it's not necessarily because they work hard. They just employ tools of leverage. A billionaire has got the same 24 hours that you have, Tafazo. But sometimes at the end of the day, you feel like you've been working very hard. But the reality is that you're not creating as much wealth as they are creating. And the reason that they are creating wealth is because they are using these tools of leverage that we're talking about. And there are 6 tools of leverage, by the way. Having defined what leverage is, so leverage is speed, leverage is the ability to do more with less, right? That's what leverage is all about. You gave us those abbreviations, OPM, OPE, OPI, OPT. Those are not tools of leverage. Those are different kinds of leverage, right? So let's start with OPM. OPM is other people's money, right? Let's talk about other people's money, Tafazo. If you want to buy a property of, say, 10 million, how long will it take you to save 10 million on a salary? It will take you a lot of, a number of years, isn't it? But you can use other people's money. When you are using other people's money, you go to the bank, you borrow money, the bank gives you maybe 95% of the value of the property, and you put a 5% deposit or a 10% deposit, but you are controlling 100% of the property. That's leverage. You have used other people's money, because the money that the bank gave you is not your money. The bank gave you other people's money, right? That's OPM. So when we talk about other people's ideas, other people, I know people think about exploitation immediately. When we explain these tools of leverage, Tafazo, I want you to erase the term exploitation from your mind. Because the person who is going to go to borrow money from the bank is not exploiting anybody, right? There are people who have deposited their money in the bank. and they are getting a fair interest for that. You go to the bank, you're going to borrow that money at a certain rate and buy a property which is going to increase in value. You have literally used other people's money. So that's OPM. Let's talk about OPE, other people's experience. Think of a situation where you read a book. Think of a situation where you get a mentor, right? Instead of learning from your own experiences, you are learning from other people's experiences. That's not exploitation. The person is ready to mentor you. That's why one of the leverage tools that you can use is getting a mentor. I cannot see anybody becoming fabulously wealthy without mentorship because it takes too long to learn it yourself. Why don't you borrow and learn from others, which is what mentorship is all about, right? Think of Jesus. Think of the gospel that you and I, Tafadzo, subscribe to, right? Everything that you read in the epistles happened in a small country of Israel with Jesus working with 12 disciples, right? But those disciples learned from Jesus and they were able to spread the gospel. So, in those 3 years of mentorship, these people became experts, right? And they were able to spread. So, there was some kind of leverage that was employed there. That's why, Tafadzwa, on this platform, we promote people reading books. You will, trust me, Tafadzwa, wealth creators read books. They don't necessarily go to university and spend 3 years, but they read books. They talk to smart people. They implement smart ideas. Those ideas that they implement are not their own. They are other people's ideas, right? So don't have this thing about exploitation because that was your first question around exploitation. Let's talk about OPI, other people's ideas, right? Have you ever heard about masterminding? Masterminding is getting together with a group of people. It's a concept that was promoted in the book Think and Grow Rich. You get together, you are part of a network, and then you mastermind on powerful money-making ideas. Those are other people's ideas. They are not your ideas. Then you go and implement them. You are part of a mastermind. Have you ever heard, Tafadzwa, the wisdom that says, I can tell where you are going by the company that you keep, right? Because company that you keep is very, very important. If you are in the company of good people, you will get their ideas. Your objective there is to associate with people that will give you the right ideas and steer you towards the right direction. That's OPI. Let's talk about OPT, other people's time, right? So here, think of the concept of delegation, delegating. So Tafadzwa, say you are in a household, you employ a helper. Some people call them maids. I don't like the word maid. I like the word helper. You are basically using their time to do mundane tasks, which they are very excited to do. But those, once you are released from those tasks, you are able to do what will create value for you. So you are employing other people's time, through delegation. So delegation is a very important way of leveraging your time as well. So, then we can talk about OPW, other people's work. Many people want a job. They want security rather than opportunity, which is why entrepreneurs build a team, right? You can't start a company and become the most hardworking person in that company. You're not going to build wealth. The people that build wealth are people who are able to build a team, right? They are using other people's work and they leverage themselves through other people, and they are able to grow. And they are paying them a fair wage, through that process, or a fair salary through that process. And that's not, exploitation at all. Hopefully, I have explained what leverage is, and I have asked you to erase the term exploitation. Because if you're thinking exploitation, you're not going to be rich. Definitely you're not going to be rich, because these are the tools that rich people employ. They use other people's work, other people's time, other people's money. It's not their money that they are using. Then you had a question around podcasts. Obviously, Trevor Noah is a brand. And think of how he has evolved. I can tell you he's going to make more money in his podcast through this ad revenue that we've been talking about, from what he was making through his daily show, which he was presenting, because he was essentially a presenter. Now he has gone podcasting, right? So there are two things that I want us to learn from there. The first thing that I want us to learn is that don't get satisfied with where you are. You start in incremental terms in this wealth creation journey, and then you must move in exponential terms. The wealth creation graph is not a straight line and should never be a straight line. The wealth creation graph is a curve, right? And the gradient of that curve becomes sharper with time. So you must create more wealth as time goes on, right? And that should be your wealth creation journey. How do people achieve that wealth creation curve? They are working less, but they are creating more time for themselves, and they are making more money. It's because they are employing these tools of leverage. So Trevor Noah, was not content just being a presenter. He went and started his own podcast. And I have given you examples of two people that have signed deals of 100 million, right? Just a deal of 100 million for presenting a podcast. A podcast is nothing complicated. It's you just, presenting some things, but they're getting paid a lot of money because many people are listening to podcasts. And that's where the money is being created these days. So that's the first thing that I want us to get. Don't be content with what you have been doing, because I see a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of workers that are becoming content with what they're doing, and they never move to the exponential ways of creating money. Because as a presenter on the Daily Show, Trevor Noah was being paid a salary, a good salary. What normally happens with people is that they become too satisfied too quickly, right? And they think that they have arrived too quickly, but they never really understand that there are exponential ways of creating, money. Let's talk about people who are no name, right? Have you ever heard of TD Jakes, Tafadzo? TD Jakes. Do you know who TD Jakes is?
Yes. I know it. You mean TD Jackson from America or
Yes,
another?
TD Jakes, the preacher.
Yes, I do.
The point that I want to make about TD Jakes is that TD Jakes is a brand name at the moment. I don't want to talk about other things about TD Jakes. I just want to focus on one aspect. At one point in his time, he was a no-name person. And being a no-name person, he identified an area of leverage, and it was going on TBN. You know TBN, the network, TBN, right? He went on TBN. He was speaking very well on TBN, and that's essentially how he became a global brand. He basically rode on TBN to become who he is at the moment. So the point that I want to make here is that it does not matter whether you're a no-name brand. you can ride over certain things by employing these tools of leverage so that you become a brand that is known. Imagine starting a church in your own small corner and there is no network that is covering you. You don't use internet. Internet has actually become a tool of leverage. That's why I don't understand, for example, a church that does not leverage on internet and leverage on live streaming for them to become known. And we can say the same thing of people like Joshua Selman. I'm sure you know who Joshua Selman is. If it had not been for internet, the guy would not have been known. And that to him has been, a tool of leverage, which he has done very well. We can talk about, the other Joshua, the TB Joshua. The guy grew famous over TV and he used that media very well as a tool of leverage, right? So I hope I have answered your question around, how do I move from being a no-name brand using podcasting? I'm just giving podcasting as an example of where money is being, created. Then let's cover the tools of leverage, Tafadzwa. And then I'll answer your last question around, because your last question was about Warren Buffett. Let's just cover the tools of leverage first. The 6 tools of leverage that we've been talking about. And then once we've covered them, we can then reflect on which of these tools is Warren Buffett using. So the first tool of leverage is financial leverage, other people's money, right? Under financial leverage, we're basically saying borrowing is not bad, right? In fact, of these 6 tools of leverage that I have presented here, financial leverage is probably the riskiest of them all. So it's the one tool that must be used with caution. But when you are employing financial leverage, you're basically using other people's money into a project. And the project that we spoke about was property. Property, property is going to accumulate in value. You're going to generate revenue. You're going to generate rentals. And therefore, you are employing some form of financial leverage, right? There are 3 things that I would want to say about financial leverage. Number 1, never borrow to consume, right? Never borrow to consume, right? Number 2, never borrow against a depreciating asset, right? So if you want to buy an asset, and never borrow without financial education. And part of financial education is setting an appetite for yourself and setting limits around financial leverage, because there are people who become overly leveraged and they can't manage that leverage. But at the end of the day, you're not going to be fabulously wealthy without employing some form of financial leverage. People that accelerate their wealth, they also borrow. The other thing that I can say about borrowing is don't borrow in your own name. Borrow in the name of a company, borrow in the name of a project. And there are some people who use special purpose vehicles and they're involved in project finance. But they do borrow. They borrow against the revenues. You need to get financial education, right? So don't have this idea that says debt is bad. As long as you come from the debt is bad brigade, I can almost guarantee you're not going to accelerate your money. You are not going to accelerate your wealth. I don't borrow in my own name. I borrow in other entities. I don't borrow against depreciating assets. Don't borrow to consume. That's another thing. I think I have highlighted that. Borrowing for consumption purposes is a no, 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 no. So that's one tool of leverage. Another tool of leverage is time leverage, right? How do you leverage your time? We all have got 24 hours in a day, right? But some people are able to do much more in a day than other people. Don't be involved in mundane tasks, which are low value creating activities. For example, you will never see me mowing the lawn. I pay other people to do that because I'm not leveraging my time if I do that. In my business, I've now learned to delegate more and more. There was a time when I would be doing tasks that I am so good at doing. But now I've realized that I'm not going to create wealth if I do the tasks that I enjoy doing, instead of giving those tasks to somebody who wants to learn those tasks through the process of delegation. Right. So people that are able to leverage their time, they are people who understand the value of their own hour. So part of what we try to do under time leverage is to teach people what is the value of your time, because time is very, very limited, right? We need to leverage. Tafadzwa, I'm sure you know about the biblical parable of the talents. Think of the guy who was given one talent and that guy buried their talent. And when the master came, they said, look, you were not able to multiply this. That whole concept of multiplication and growing of talents and growing of wealth, because a talent is nothing but a sum of money at the end of the day. It's exactly what we are talking about, leverage, right? What we are simply talking about is how you can speed up that growth. But growth is an imperative. Growing your talent, growing your time, these are things that the master is even very much concerned about. You cannot waste time. You cannot waste time doing low value creating tasks. Pay somebody to do it. Do things that create time, right? Um, then technology and system leverage. Under technology, we can even talk about the internet, the power of the internet. We can even talk about artificial intelligence. If you are not leveraging on artificial intelligence tools, you're wasting your time. You're not leveraging on technology. If you are not creating a system in your business and everything revolves around you, you are not leveraging yourself. Because part of what an entrepreneur has to do is to create systems in their business, a system of marketing, a system of sales, a system of managing finances. Sometimes I see people that do not have system leverages. Creating systems is um, um, a tool of leveraging, documenting those systems and procedures. Communication and marketing leverage, right? We spoke about TD Jakes and how he went on to TBN, promoted himself, marketed his brand, built his brand. That's a tool of leverage. How do you communicate? How do you market yourself? How do you package yourself? You know, that kind of thing. What are you known for? Those are tools of leverage. Network and relationship leverage. And that's something that, you know, many people do not spend time doing. You've heard the statement, Tafadzwa, your network is your net worth. Show me the people that you associate with. I will show you where you are going and what your net worth is. You network with poor people, you have got strong relationships with people that don't have money, you're not going to make money. So you always try to network at the right level, right? Because you're going to benefit from other people's ideas. Then let's talk about knowledge and experience leverage there. So that's where mentorship, you know, comes in. So let me now answer. Now that I have spoken about the 6 tools of leverage, which is basically the gist of our presentation today, let's now talk about some of the tools that Warren Buffett has employed. Warren Buffett was mentored by a mentor that we've spoken about in university. So all the investment philosophy that he talks about. He came across this guy, Graham Benjamin, at university. That was his knowledge and experience leverage. He went through a mentorship philosophy and he applied Benjamin's philosophy in investing, right? Because you don't want to waste time understanding this investment game. So he definitely employed knowledge and experience, leverage. Let's talk about network and relationship leverage. Warren Buffett is very famous for associating with Bill Gates. I think on the internet in the past few weeks, everyone has been talking about how that relationship has deteriorated, over time, between, Gates and Warren Buffett. They play bridge together. Sometimes Warren Buffett flies his private jet to go and see, Bill Gates. That's a network and relationship, leverage, right? Let's talk about time leverage. Warren Buffett spends most of his time studying financial statements. He's become very good at financial statements and being able to spot investments. In fact, the question was asked to Warren Buffett, why have you located your business, in Omaha, which is very, very far from New York, where most of the business seems to be happening? He says, I want to be in a very quiet place so that I can focus where there is no noise, so that I can make the right investments. Let's talk about financial leverage. Warren Buffett, some of his significant investments are in insurance companies. Insurance companies generate quite a lot of cash, and he has been able to use some of those financial instruments to generate, wealth. So the long and short of what I'm trying to say is, show me any wealthy person, Tafazo. I can show you how they have employed these 6 tools of leverage in creating their wealth. You may not necessarily be at Warren Buffett's level, but there are practical things that you can do. Number one, get a mentor, right? Other people's ideas, right? Number two, be deliberate in your networking as you create wealth. Number three, get some form of financial education. Number four, manage your time very well. People waste time, right? And as you get more education, don't be involved in mundane tasks for which you can pay somebody to do at a cheaper rate. Use debt wisely. We've always spoken about the importance of maintaining a very good credit rating, because your credit rating is basically your financial reputation in the market. And it's the basis on which you're going to be able to raise debt in everything, that you're going to do. So manage that very well. We've been talking about artificial intelligence, technology. Today we're talking about podcasting. Those are leverage points that we can employ. Delegate tasks. Delegate. I've worked in churches where everything revolves around the man of God. The man of God preaches, they sing, they do everything. They don't delegate. And I can almost predict that there is no leverage, there is no growth in those ministries, because part of what it is, if you are to leverage yourself, if Jesus did everything, the gospel would not have spread to the uttermost ends of the earth. He employed some form of leverage, trained some people, delegated certain tasks. Part of employing tools of leverage, Tafazo, we should have spoken about the principles around leverage. There are certain principles that underlie the concept of leverage. One of the principles that we should have spoken about is the principle of making yourself unnecessary. I don't know if you got that, Tafazi. I want to talk about 3 principles of leverage. what I'm presenting there are 6 tools of leverage, tools that you actually employ, or 6 strategies of leverages. That's what I'm presenting on those lines. But underlying, or to be able to use these tools of leverage, you operate them with certain principles. And let's just talk about some of those principles. Principle number 1, make yourself unnecessary. If you are an entrepreneur, over time, you must make yourself unnecessary by delegating tasks, creating systems. If everything is revolving around you, you are the person who opens the doors for the customer to come in. You are the person that operates the cash register. You are the one who is paying employees. You are very necessary in that business. And that business is going to be limited by you because the growth of that business is dependent. And besides, you are growing old, which means that over time, your business will also grow old because you're not going to have the same energy and vitality that you have had over time. You're not creating systems. The same concept applies in running a church. If everything revolves around you and the church is dependent on your talents and your capabilities, and you're not leveraging your time and your efforts, the day you die is the day that your ministry is going to die. It's just, so make yourself unnecessary, right? So that over time you work less, but you have got more impact. That's principle number 1. Principle number 2, this you must get, guys. And because this is one of the things that limits people in terms of leveraging their efforts. Tafadzwa, let me ask you a question. If somebody is selling you something, what is the first question that most people normally ask? What is the first question that most people normally ask? Say I come to you and I'm selling you an expensive watch. What do you think is the question that most people normally ask?
Normally, people want to know how much it is and if it's expensive.
How much will it cost me? How much will it cost me? That's the first question they will ask, isn't it? That's the wrong question. That's the wrong question. Because if that is the first question that you are asking, you are violating a principle of leverage. Because the principle of leverage basically says costs first, benefits later, right? So the question that you should be asking is, how much will it benefit me? This thing that you are selling, don't ask about the cost. Ask about the benefits, right? How much will it benefit me? Let me give you an example. Say I'm selling you an expensive Rolex watch. The first question that somebody may ask is, what is the cost? But that's the wrong question. The question should be, how much will it benefit me? Understand the benefits first, then ask about the costs later. Because what is going to bring leverage to you is the benefits, which is why in the whole process of wealth accumulation, we delay gratification because we are willing to sacrifice now so that we can get the benefits later. Say, for example, somebody is selling you an expensive Rolex watch. And then you say, how much will it cost me? And then they say 1 million. And you don't have the 1 million, all right? Then you say, I don't need your Rolex watch. But if by putting on that Rolex watch, somebody is going to have a favorable impression of you and they're going to give you a deal worth 5 million. Let me ask you a question. Was that 1 million investment worth it, Tafadzwa, in the Rolex watch?
Yes, for the return on investment.
Yeah, because the question is, what is the benefit? How much is good? What is the return on investment That should be the question. Because the cost might be 1 million, but the return on that million could be, 2,000, because I'm going to get certain benefits. Because these are the things that stop people from employing leverage. They will tell you, your course is very expensive. I've heard that. But you see, if you attend my course, you're going to get benefits which are going to yield a return on investment of 1,000%. So you are better off sacrificing that cost so that you can benefit later on, right? Talk about the marketing leverage, right? Sometimes, if do you think going on TBN is cheap, Tafadzo? Let me ask you a question. Say you are a preacher. You're a preacher. Think of the decision that TD Jakes had to make. He is a preacher. He is a no-name brand. And somebody comes and says, look, we are promoting this network called TBN. For you to be on TBN, you pay so much. That was expensive. But the calculation that TD Jakes had to make was, if I get onto this network, it's going to give me visibility, and it's going to increase my brand, and I'm going to be known. And based on being known, I'm going to do a massive conference where people, I think the conference was called Women Thou Art Loose or something like that. And people were flocking from all over the world. This is a person who employed the marketing leverage. But I can tell you, it was not cheap for TD Jakes to go on to TBN. But the benefits later on paid off. And that is the thing about leverage. If you focus on costs too much, right, without taking into account the benefits, you are not going to leverage your efforts. Because most of the people that went on to do outstanding things in the world of wealth creation, they sacrificed in the beginning. They delayed gratification, and that sacrifice paid off over years. They did not look at the cost, but they focused much more on the benefits. Because if your first question is cost, and you're always about cost, you're not going to multiply your efforts. So that's the second principle there. In the book that I spoke about, Tafadzo, the leverage equation, the book that I'm going through, the writer talks about 9 principles of leverage. I'm not going to give away the 9 principles of leverage. I'm just going to talk about the 3 principles. The 3 principles that I'm presenting now are part of his 9 principles of leverage. So I'm not going to do all the work for you. You would have to go and read the book yourselves, because those principles underline the strategies for leverage, right? Very, very important for us to understand. The third principle that I would want to talk about is the whole principle around time, because the writer basically says, if you are trading time for money, you limit your wealth creation, right? So if you're always trading time for money, which is why a job is not a good idea in terms of wealth creation, because you can only trade so many hours in a day for which you can be compensated. People that go on to become billionaires don't trade time for money. So the one principle that I would want to say is that stop trading time for money. Stop trading time for money, because you will limit your wealth creation. You need to think about, how can I leverage, right? And part of leveraging is creating value for so many people. Tafadza, let me ask you a question. In your mind, who should be paid more? A doctor who is treating people of diseases, and a soccer player? Who should be paid more and compensated more? Let me ask you that question. And then you probably have seen where I'm going with this question, Tafadza. Who is paid more? a soccer player like Lionel Messi or a doctor who has gone 6 years to study? Who is paid more?
It's the soccer player.
Does it make sense to you that a soccer player who is just kicking a ball and providing entertainment is being paid more than a doctor who is seriously treating people of diseases because they may die? Does it make sense to you? If it doesn't make sense to you, maybe you can explain why that is the case.
Is it also not because if you're a soccer player, your lifespan is short? A doctor can be a doctor until you're like Warren Buffett at 94. So you can catch up.
The answer to the question is around marketing leverage. Soccer has become a business which is watched by so many people, and it provides entertainment. Out of that entertainment, billions of dollars are flowing. If the soccer player was just playing soccer and there was no TV involved, Lionel Messi would not be paid the millions that he's paid. But the reason why he's being paid the millions that is being paid, it's because of the marketing leverage. Somebody has become very good at marketing soccer as a game to such an extent that there are billions of people that are watching soccer or watching any sport for that matter at any time. And because of these billions of followers, if if those billions are watching, it becomes an opportunity for people to advertise. And that's where most of this money is being made. Unlike a doctor, doctors can make money. They just need to leverage themselves using the communication and marketing leverage, right? So a doctor can end up making money to the same extent as Lionel Messi is making money. But they need to employ leverage. If they just operate in their own place, yes, they are doing significant work, but they are not going to be compensated because it's all about employing these tools of leverage. So once you get that idea, I want you to think about what you are doing at the moment and what tool you can use of these 6 tools. Which tool can you use to leverage your efforts? At the end of the day, it's about having many people following you, solving problems for a huge number of people, right? Which is what Lionel Messi does. He's very talented, but he's not the only talented person in his own field. But he has been able to make money. And that's what leverage is all about. We've gone over time, Tafazo, but let me stop here for now.
Thank you very much, Themba. I was about to ask whether your watch is working today, because we're normally the first one to mention about time. But we really appreciate your contribution, and we've learned a lot. We just want to acknowledge some people who were part of the platform, the live, Nyari Majanke, and there's Isaac Apia, was watching from Ghana. Thank you very much. We appreciate just mentioning that those whose names are appearing, but everyone who followed us today, we really appreciate. We don't take you for granted. Let's grow together. Your dream is worth fighting for. If you want to get hold of Themba, you can connect with him on his LinkedIn, or you can follow his YouTube channel, Manage Your Finance Like a Black Belt. If you would like to get hold of me, you can write to us, Themba Mazibuko Speaks, .co.za. Have a great weekend ahead, and let's go out and leverage. Cheers.